Well, we have to continue the journey. And I think we go around in one big circle. So
Yeah,
hopefully we'll get around to the start again and we'll start thinking visionary about the region and not parochially. So
absolutely.
that's the only hope we can have, that
Absolutely.
it is a circular issue. So I worry about where ASEAN is. ASEAN going to define its place?
Right.
Um, or is it just going to be an organization of convenience?
Right.
Uh, so this is what happens when the soul goes out and the spirituality goes out of organizations.
No, you're right. I mean, you said it. I've got the words right in front of my face where there's a lostness of the soul of man.
Mm,
And everybody's there seems to be a loss of identity,
mm.
meaning to life. What's the purpose? What am I here for? If there's no sense of belonging. And I think that root sense of belonging is key for anyone to prosper. You see, you need to belong somewhere. And so we all
Well,
have to
it's
be.
a belief in something greater than yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where spirituality comes in because,
Yeah.
if it's all about you and you and you, that is the beginning of the end, you see.
Mm.
And I think that unfortunately, spirituality can be adulterated in many ways in different countries, even in this country.
Your concerns matter. Join plastic surgeon Dr. Charles Lee on Heart Talk.
Welcome to Heart Talk, coming to you from Kota Kinabalu, the capital city of Sabah in Malaysia. Thank you for joining me. And a few things I'd like to sort of tell you up front. Please, if you're visiting this channel for the first time, please like, share, subscribe, and tell the whole world that what we are discussing, what we are talking about are important and matters of the heart. Now, here's my opening statement. Different parts of the world are going through different conversations. Democracy is one such conversation that is being challenged in different parts of the world in different ways. Now, it's important to realize, and I've said this for many years, hope is the currency of the future in the present. But there's also blind hope. And blind hope is willful ignorance of the past. Now, my guest today has spent the last 30 years or more of his adult life seeking after the destiny of hope for nations, for a better future for its people, warning against the pitfalls of past blind mistakes and blind hope. And we want to not fall into that trap. His name is Murray Hunter. And he's an Australian journalist and an entrepreneur involved in the business scene in the Asia-Pacific region. He's a consultant, he's an academic, he's a researcher into creativity, innovation, and how these two important hallmarks are really the source of thriving of nations in this part of the world. This conversation is to seek out his worldviews of various events that are taking place right now in the geopolitical arena in the Asia-Pacific region. And Murray takes a transdisciplinary view of issues and events, trying to relate this to the enrichment and the empowerment of people in the region. So join me to welcome Murray Hunter to Heart Talk. Welcome, Murray.
Oh, good morning, Charles. It's really nice to meet you, and a pleasure and even an honor to be on your podcast, because I had a look through a lot of your videos on YouTube, and you've got a wide spectrum of interests there. So this is very good, and I hope we can cover sort of part of that spectrum this morning.
It's an honor to have you. And there's so much that you have gone through, seen, written about. And it'll be very interesting to seek out your thoughts and ideas of where we're going forward. In the 1960s and 1970s, the glory days of the Australian slang really arrived in this part of the world. And I remember many of my colleagues who doctors who went to Australia to, major in medicine. When they came back, we used to all have our gatherings and we used to sing, Waltzing Matilda. Once a jolly swagman, camped by his billabong. And we don't get the songs anymore. When these people are coming back and all that fire and flavor that we used to have around the piano, don't get to hear it. And, and for example, in the 1960s, remember Joan Baez? And she used to sing the songs like, we shall overcome, we shall overcome, all those songs I grew up listening. And in the 1980s, I don't know whether you remember Men at Work, Colin Hayes. I come from the land down under, and his words were so reflective of local situations, and I really remember them. Can you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. And so, Murray, there's a very eerie feeling across the world today in the spirit of the age of one of kind of reclining back towards silomaniac holes and tunnels, afraid to speak out from the heart. And I want your thoughts about this because, what was there in the 1980s has sort of multiple tenfold. So what has being human become? So let's start from there. Your views on the spirit of the age and all those songs we used to sing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, crying for a struggle for freedom. Where are we today? Let's go.
Oh, that's so wide. I'll just make a early comment on what you said about being an Australian expatriate. One of the sad things is that I read the history, and I was born after World War II, where Australia liberated parts of Borneo, and they were involved in Malaya and Sito, and they had a base in Butterworth, and the New Zealanders had a platoon in Singapore. And Australia, and to a lesser extent New Zealand, had this great rapport with the region after World War II. And I thought that Australia could become part of Southeast Asia. And that was a great hope. There would be this multicultural society, and we'd be accepted in Asia, and we would share in the destiny. And as I get older, I see Australia drifting away, and the influence of Australia almost irrelevant. It's a piece of land in the south that nobody wants to talk about. So that's very sad.
So if you think that, I mean, I was going to talk about this towards the end of the podcast about the role of Australia, and I remember when we still commemorate the death march from Sandakan to Ranau, and how many soldiers, there were more than 2,000 of them lost their lives during that time. And the influence, and I remember Butterworth, and I remember, the base that was there and all that. But, coming back to what's happening in the world today, so many countries have sort of now gone into their first kind of principles, looking after their own interests. And I agree with you that it'll be great. So I'm going to talk about the Australian influence in this, geopolitical area later when we go on. But do you sense what was the struggle in the 80s and the crying out for freedom and all that? Do you sense that has kind of like submerged now?
Well, we're living in a completely different world. We had only the radio, and we had, and I remember I used to wait for Asiaweek in the Far Eastern Economic Review.
Right.
And we used to read that, and that was about the only links we had with Asia. And then we had the internet, we had all this information, and as time goes on, from the point of view of Australia, they become much less involved in Asia. Now, Indonesian used to be a language that every school learned. It's been discontinued.
Okay.
So Australia is sort of becoming very introverted, very parochial, and is going its own way. So that's very sad. That hope that Australia would reach out, and we were one day talking about, this was under Paul Keating in the 90s, that one day Australia may be part of ASEAN.
Right. This is the hope that nations will come together
Yeah.
under the umbrella of a shared prosperity vision, which I will talk to and allude to later on in the conversation. Now, let me move on to a part. My opening statement was on democracy and the spirit of democracy. And the central core principle that I can understand is that when people have faith in the political process, and much of the promises that are made and, and kept, and some of them are just forgotten. So let's talk about that. What makes a democracy in today's context of globalization? What are your thoughts on just the term democracy? Because that seems to be bandied around as if it's another word in the vocabulary, but it's essentially the freedom of nations when you talk about democracy.
Well, I still don't really understand what democracy means, because it's more about voting in an election. And what we're really run by in the world today, in every country, is not the political, is not the cabinet, is not the prime minister, the president, or whatever he's called in any country. It's the administrative state. They make the laws, they make the regulations, they interpret them. So the biggest influence upon your life would be the Bandaraya Kota Kinabalu, because every day you're coming up against it.
In the context of this global crisis of democracy today, I mean, America just had their elections and it's about American first. And now we're talking about Europe, and now we're talking about Asia. There's so much of challenges. I still think of the song Men at Work, Down Under, where it says, you better run, you better take cover, because, everywhere you look, there's a problem. But, as a doctor, we are all in our own fixed mindset world. And this is the fallacy of everything, because we just go to work, we come back, we go to work, and we are just told to look after your family, grow them, that's it, and accept everything that's happening around us. But there's so much of crisis of information that's happening, Murray. I mean, you're a journalist. You have been writing all your life. Freedom of speech is really freedom of expression. You've been writing and your thoughts about this, because I've never heard of words that are terms being used today, Murray. You're talking about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, what's fake news, so many things happening. So as a writer, as a journalist, how do you keep on the track of not getting too involved with what's happening on the local scene, but still writing about your thoughts of where the world is going to? How do you keep on track?
Well, we don't know the truth anymore.
But you know it. I mean, the point is that the world may not know it, but you as a writer, when you are writing something, you know that you are responsible for what you're writing. So
yeah,
I get a lot of emails coming into my inbox, and I kind of, if I don't recognize the person, I kind of delete it, because you just do not know what you're reading. So how do you stay in this, to me, is a narrow lane today?
Well, it's very hard, because I, like you, get many emails, and I listen to YouTube, and I read this and I read that. And sometimes I ask what's true and what's not true. And it's very difficult to know. And if we look at Ukraine and we look at Gaza, there's so many different narratives going on.
Sure.
What's the real truth?
Yeah. But I'm talking about where you are now. I mean, in Asia, looking at, you mentioned Asiaweek. I remember Asian Week and the Far Eastern Economic Review, and those were good materials to read, because they were quite engaging for those of us who are professionals and coming out and wanting to know what's happening, looking at Asia through Asian eyes. Your thoughts on that? I mean, let's just, you've been here for so long, so many years. How do you see Asia through Asian eyes, within brackets, Australian kind of lenses?
Every country has its own driven narratives, its own histories, based on its own geographical areas and interest. Sure. And every area has different narratives and different interests. So there's no real pan-Asian aspirations that people have in common. But in the old days, when ASEAN was formed, It was formed by the foreign ministers. There was 5 foreign ministers and from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Thailand, and they were legendary figures in those times, wise people, all baby boomers that had this vision for ASEAN. But now each country is interested in competing for foreign investment and developing their own industries. Sometimes they're really competing against each other. And things like the Asian Economic Community, all good in name, came out in 2015. But in 2024, what do we really have?
Right.
Nothing. So governments have become much more parochial about their own interest. And you'll see the business in each capital city. If you go to Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, it's run by a group of families that are different. So it hasn't changed. KK has a group of families who dominate the business.
Okay.
And it's like that across the whole region.
Yeah.
So there's no real pan-ASEAN vision anymore. And that's a problem now. What is the future of ASEAN? Is there a future of ASEAN? Is it just a talk fest that you go to and you stay in a nice hotel and meet once a year and in a different capital of ASEAN? Is it going any further? You have BRICS now, and BRICS has the Belt and Road Initiative, which is actually something that needs to be taken seriously. But if you read some news, I'll say the debt traps, and this was China's way of trying to dominate, countries. Where if you talk to other people, they say this BRI is the most brilliant idea about getting goods. So what's true?
I think that the whole movement of countries looking after their own interests is a valid one, because you will find that there come a time when the tire hits the road, they got to look inward and make sure that the country is nice and strong. I mean, you began as an entrepreneur, right? You were in the business of essential oils and tea tree oils and all that. Where's the whole point of creativity coming in? I mean, to me, as I got essential oil here, it's called abundance. And why didn't you stay on that? You would have been a multi-millionaire by now. I mean, be like a king.
Well, I made a decision. I just sort of stopped doing business. I made a lot of money, but it had no meaning to me.
Why?
So
you mentioned there's chemistry.
Yeah.
And then there are different parts of that whole.
No, I love the journey.
Okay.
I didn't like getting there. I could start up and I could create things.
Right.
But I didn't like managing them. It made me very boring. And that's a trait of entrepreneurship. Some people are very good at startups, and some people are very good at running things. And some people can do both, but not very many people can do both.
Right.
And then I had the opportunity after I went out of business.
Right.
And the plantation in Perlis in near Kanga. I started talking to the university, and there was an issue about how to get the young people of Malaysia entrepreneurial. Right. And I was a sealer because I saw entrepreneurship as a major driver of the economy, because when I went to KK, and I spent a lot of time in KK, and I spent a lot of time in Sarawak and Kelantan and Kedah and Perlis, what I noticed that the majority of the economy is made up of ordinary people, the informal economy. Yeah. And from the eyes I saw it, because I didn't live in KL for many years, I saw the rural the rural parts of Malaysia and the towns as a place that has to be developed.
You know, let's just take up this word creativity. This is something that I read your article on it, and I thought it was magic. Because I've always said that creativity is the currency of the universe. I mean, to be creative. And as a plastic surgeon, for me, everything is about creativity. You take a problem and then you create how you're going to solve that whole surgical mess that comes out of it. How important is creativity and innovation in the sustenance of development in a country? Because I find that, people are not creative. It's all copy and paste.
But going back one thing, before, when I was writing about creativity,
Right.
I wrote about how the brain works.
Yep.
And that took me 2 years. That took me 2 years to work that out. And I had to spend a lot of time at just temples, at my own time, not interfering with other people, and thinking and learning and going back to my past education. But then I realized not all people can be creative in the same way.
Right.
If different people have different attributes. So the ability to be creative often depends upon the attributes of people. And when I went to do community development, then I realized not all people are equal when it comes to creativity. So before we teach people to be creative, we have to enhance their attributes and turn talents into ability.
Right.
And that's a lot harder. And then you have issues that I'm just starting to grapple with now, is if you have dyslexia,
right,
and autism. I'm suddenly starting to realize that a large percentage of the population has some of these ailments, or I don't know what you call them,
right.
because if you have some forms of dyslexia, you can't read and write and do mathematics,
Yeah.
but you have this wonderful spatial ability to think spatially.
Right.
And that means the frontal lobe of your brain is much more developed at the cost of, say, the left or the right hemisphere.
Yeah.
So then I started learning that many successful entrepreneurs had dyslexia or some mild form of autism.
I feel that, creativity for me is a key in the growth and sustenance of any nation. You forget people who are creative in thinking, how do we think out of the box, so to speak. And that's why I'm doing my book.
I know. I've listened to your
Thank
your
you.
explanation on it.
Thank you. I started with a piece of paper. In fact, when I was living on my own, I went out and did a sabbatical for like 2 years to try and understand where my life was, what happened, and where I've arrived. And I realized that creativity for me was key and essential, and that's why I took the letters creative and sourced out 7 brain zones that I can tap into and create a response system, because I was suffering from a reaction mode of growing up, and patterns that have developed over the years, and I was reacting to all these situations, basically emotions that were toxic. And so I realized that many of us don't know how to respond to challenges, you see. And we come up with the old patterns, playing the same story over and over again. You know what I mean?
Well, with the patterning, what you have to do is learn to identify it first, because you
Correct.
don't know.
Absolutely.
And they're basically their emotions. And then I learned there's 2 parts of the brain, partly wrapped around the heart and partly in the stomach.
Yeah.
And they interact with your brain. So a
Sure.
lot of the emotions come from stored parts of the body.
So it took me 2 years to try and understand. Basically, I came up with this mental simulating model that we can turn to at a spark of a moment so that we respond in a way that ends up with an optimal experience and not a tragic one.
Mm.
Because many of us grow up, and I grew up with stored trauma. But anyway, coming back to this whole situation of countries and the need for innovation, I think you read about my chi transformation factor.
Mm.
And in the center of creativity and innovation is hope. Countries don't have hope today. Isn't it so important that we have this hope of a better future, a better head?
Well, I see this as a generational thing.
Right.
I'm a baby boomer. I assume you are at the end of the
Of course.
baby boomer, so we had the advantage of mixing with that generation. And then came Gen X, that was an extension of baby boomers, but they knew how to improve upon mistakes that baby boomers came.
Right.
And then we came to the millennials, and now we've got Gen Z.
Right.
And the big transition in government is we no longer have visionaries as leaders, we have managers as leaders.
Yeah.
So I really see, if I talk about Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman, his vision for Malaysia, he was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
He saw this vision. There are other political reasons as well.
Sure.
Dr. Mahathir, he ran the country like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's right. I mean, I agree with you there because we are talking about this country, Malaysia. And you mentioned Tun Dr. Mahathir, and he was one of my guests on Hard Talk. And it is titled up from his book called Capturing Hope, because we are talking about hope, a struggle for a new Malaysia.
Yep.
And I remember in this conversation with him, and I'm sure you'll be keen to know that there was an American author called William Briggs, and he wrote this book called Transitions. And he talks about these three phases, there's the ending, and then there's a neutral zone, and then there's a beginning. And I remember saying that from the time of independence, Malaysia is still in this neutral zone. And we don't have the right leaders to take it on to a new beginning. And that's why there's still a struggle of hope. And and this is why it's so important. But the good point that at the end of the book, he wrote this statement about titled Quo Vadis Malaysia? Where are you going, Malaysia? And that became a series of conversations that I came up with. And but I want to congratulate him for coming up with what's called the shared prosperity vision. And I want your thoughts about it, because that shared prosperity vision, Murray, is bringing the difference, the disparity between the urban and the rural. It's on geographical lines, not racial lines. And I think this is the key to success and sustainability in any country. And I'm talking about Sabah, for example.
Yeah.
There's a big disparity, economic, I call it a fracture, between the urban cities like Kota Kinabalu and a rural, hinterland called Tonggott, let's say, for example, which has got the highest extreme poverty rate of 1.2%.
Yeah, well, I was around the Quimanes area.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time there back 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
And when we left every morning from KK, it was like going out into nothing. And the same in Sarawak, 15 Ks outside of Kuching or KK.
Right.
You're 25, 30, 40 years behind.
This is why if this whole, there's a great old prophetic saying, where there is no vision, the people perish. And what we need is a vision of how we can share. I mean, I can't understand why prosperity of a nation cannot be shared unless there's undergirding of fear of losing what you have. All right. And this is why I feel, and I want your thoughts about it, that the struggle that these nations, in fact, in Malaysia, is the fear of losing what you have instead of sharing it. And I think this shared prosperity vision on geographical lines is something that countries should aspire to. This, especially like, for example, Sabah.
I put it back to what you were talking about before, Charles, patterning.
Right.
What we've done in Malaysia is we've done our development top down.
Okay. Yeah.
The government says, this is a great idea. This is going to eliminate poverty. And they allocate funds and they build the infrastructure and they get all they used to have the IADP projects, which were very successful, integrated agricultural development projects. And they had people on the ground. And there were people who studied in the UK, America, Australia, New Zealand, and wherever. And they saw the projects through to the end. Where in Thailand, Thaksin went to Japan the same time as Mahathir went to Japan, and he saw the one product, one kampong. So what the Thais did, instead of saying, you need this to develop, the Thais went to the village and said they had a meeting. Muslims would call it a shura, and they where the community would get together and they would ask the community, what do you want?
Yeah.
And the community say, we want water, we want clean, we want electricity, we want to work the way we work, so I've got time to look after the children, or cook this, or go to the mosque, or whatever they want to do. So they wanted to have some sort of income compatible with their culture.
Yeah, sure.
So that's what the Thais created.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's no one method fits all. No one hat kind of wears on everybody's head. But I've been in Sabah now for 38 years, going on 40. And I think this great divide between the urban and the rural areas is where the focus should be, because when you bring that and narrow that gap, which is fractured as far as I'm concerned, you will find that prosperity comes in and you can sustain it. And I want your thoughts now, because the elephant in the room, at least in this region, is Indonesia. And last year when they had their presidential elections, and I was having this conversation with one of my guests, but nearly 40% were millennials who voted, young people. And then I was talking to a youth leader here in an organization called Civil, where, this is a time when all the youth get together and look at the economy of how we can bridge this, with the capital coming now to Nusantara. And I think that this is a fantastic opportunity, don't you think, for Sabah and Nusantara? I mean, Nusantara could be the spearhead for development in Sabah.
Oh, in theory, yes. But I'm reading a lot of stuff coming out of Indonesia over the last couple of days. And there's a few hiccups there. But Nusantara has the potential of taking the focus away from Putrajaya. And that's going to change.
That's something that, I mean, you can defocus in any area you like, but I'm thinking about just Sabah going to link up with Nusantara and use that as a spearhead for development, Murray. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but the problem is you have an issue like Papua New Guinea. To access Nusantara from KK or from Brunei or from Kuching or from Miri or Bintulu, you have to have the road and travel system.
Sure.
And Borneo is a very, very difficult island to develop transport and communication. So it's going to require massive investment to get people together.
I think. You're right. Sorry. You're saying,
Yeah, so that's one issue for Borneo, that a solution has to be found because the people of Sarawak and the people of Sabah don't even know each other.
Yeah, anyway, I won't go into that, because Yeah, I mean, you got a point there in the sense that whenever they say Sabah, Sarawak, these are two nations.
Yeah,
And their history behind them is totally different. But what I wanted your thoughts on is that now we have a big opening with the capital city coming into, East Kalimantan. There are about 3 million people out there. And Kota Kinabalu being an international landing spot, with the Pan-Borneo Highway. I mean, we're looking at the next 20, 30 years, Murray.
yeah.
If Sabah gets its act together and sees that the opportunity of this tripartite, and even if we bring in Australia and use the forces, and I'm talking about, from the medical point of view, Murray, many of my colleagues went to Adelaide to be trained in craniofacial surgery.
Mm.
All right. You imagine the amount of finance that was put into them to get trained to come back. I went to England, and another colleague of mine went to Japan. And I'm thinking that you talked about Australia coming in from the health point of view, from health tourism. We could set up a massive, nice, project where the whole area of the region, people have got craniofacial problems with the expertise of Australia coming in. And then you got the economy of Nusantara and Sabah coming in. I mean, to me, the scopes are sky high if they have the vision for it.
No, these are the dreams that have to be turned into vision, but you need leaders to do it.
Absolutely. And you're right. You hit it on the spot. And this is why there needs to be a renaissance of leaders who are revolutionary in their thinking out of the box.
So you're talking a Nusantara man or woman.
No, but it's true. I mean, it's a blessing if they take off the veils from their eyes and see right there's a capital city from one of the largest regions here with 285 million people behind them. Sky's the limit, and we are positioned very well in Sabah to reap the benefits. It just needs a good, But anyway, coming back to you, where do you see China in all of this?
Well, China's emerging and I just went there a few months ago, and I'm very impressed with China.
Of course.
And they have their Chinese dream, and they want to create a nation that's very nationalistic, and we have a lot to learn from China now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. With the billion over people, you've got India here on the left. And these are, nations that have become successful. And there's so much to learn as opposed to less risks and more opportunities if people can see through it. And I think you're right. It's just a question of how do we get away from the run and hide kind of thing, that song I told you about in the beginning. Is it time to,
You imagine if all the farms in Sabah could produce organic produce and seafood and take it to the airport and fly it to all the coastal cities of China, how wealthy Sabah would be.
I'll tell you, it's the other way around. They are all coming here for the seafood.
Yeah, but why not export the seafood to China? And these are the visionary projects, entrepreneurial projects that I think Sabahans have to go over, propose, and facilitate.
Well, your passing thoughts. I mean, where do we go from here? Where do you see this part of the world going to?
Well, we have to continue the journey. And I think we go around in one big circle. So hopefully we'll get around to the start again, and we'll start thinking visionary about the region and not parochially. So
absolutely,
that's the only hope we can have.
Absolutely,
it is a circular issue. So I worry about where ASEAN is. ASEAN going to define its place?
Right.
Or is it just going to be an organization of convenience?
Right.
So this is what happens when the soul goes out and the spirituality goes out of organizations.
No, you're right. I mean, you said it. I've got the words right in front of my face where there's a lostness of the soul of man.
Mm,
And there seems to be a loss of identity,
mm.
meaning to life. What's the purpose? What am I here for? If there's no sense of belonging. And I think that root sense of belonging is key for anyone to prosper. You see, you need to belong somewhere. And so we all have
Well,
to
it's
be.
a belief in something greater than yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where spirituality comes in because,
Yeah.
if it's all about you and you and you, that is the beginning of the end, you see.
Mm.
And I think that, unfortunately, spirituality can be adulterated in many ways in different countries, even in this country. And so, there'll be brighter days. So, are you happy where you are? I mean, at the end of this journey, do you look and say, "I lived it. I've written
No,
about it."
no, one can, if one complains, then one's not going to be happy.
Absolutely.
So it's very important to think of the here and the now and what's going to happen in the future, because you should always live today like there's going to be no tomorrow and keep going. And that lets you wake up every morning. So I enjoy my morning with a run and I get ideas.
Sure.
When I don't think, the best way to be creative is not to think. And when you get to
Yeah.
that, and so you in the morning, you have that spiritual experience, which brings that creativity. And I think that's something a lot of people are losing. And you can see it in the poor health of people. So they're coming to people like you. They're keeping the medical profession going. They're keeping pharma going. When many of our solutions are just by solitude and enjoying interacting with nature, and we've
Absolutely.
lost that. We've totally
Absolutely. I
lost
mean,
it.
I absolutely. I remember when I first came back, Murray, and people would ask me, "How are your patients doing?" Today it's different. Today it's how's business, and
Yeah,
it's a total different field. But anyway, it's great talking to you. I know there are many other areas that we can talk about, but we are limited to what is safe. You
yep.
know what I mean? And but I want to wish you well, and keep in thoughts because they're really deep. And I am enjoying some of your writings now. And now that I've linked up with what you're writing, I hope that our conversations will go on for a better beginning for everything that's around us.
Yeah, well, read the early stuff that's non-political, because
Yeah, sure.
there's a lot of work there. You can go to my Substack and go to Entrepreneurship,
Right.
and you'll see a whole stream. All
I
the
know.
creativity
I
is
went. I
there.
had a look at it, and I had to put on my snorkels because I was going too deep. So,
Mm,
so and it's like diving in Sipadan. The deeper you go, the more beautiful the fish are.
yeah,
But I want to congratulate you. And so, on that note, Murray, thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk. It's been wonderful to have you, and I hope that we'll be able to meet face to face, either where you are at or here in Sabah.
yeah.
And
Well, it's been a pleasure.
so thank you very much. And for all of you who have just joined or been watching and listening to what we're talking about, I want to encourage you to get on to Substack, right?
Yep.
.com, and you can see some of the articles that Murray Hunter has written. And it's a voice from Asia to Asians, and it's very interesting. So thank you very much for joining in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Heart Talk channel, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Charles.
Pleasure.